This was kind of a year of endings as well for movies, I feel, and for television in some cases, like Game of Thrones. And that's been going for most of a decade. So, in a lot of ways, there was some things that were coming full circle this year where movies and television were concerned. And I also felt that 2019 was kind of the year of the comic book. And I'm actually getting ready to do a post on this on the Lost Title Cards, hence what I was talking about before. You see where it's coming back, right? So I'm going to talk a little, very little about each of those things. Um, and then you'll just have to read the other article to get what I'm talking about. But yeah, year of the comic book, just because there were a lot of different types of comic book movies, a lot of superhero stuff. There were some things that were inspired by but weren't actually originally comic books. There were like Brightburn, that's a movie that came out, was basically like, what if Superman was like Damien or something like that. And I didn't get a chance to see it, but I'm heard it's good and I do want to check that one out. There were a lot of movies to get through, a lot of TV to get through this last year, and I didn't get through everything I wanted to, but I got through most of it. So I'm going to go ahead and do kind of my top and notables. It was a really great decade for film, first of all. After the 2000s kind of came in, the knots, as it were, and it was very hit and miss where film was concerned. You would have some really great things, like kind of indie kind of came into this, I want to say like a renaissance in the 2000s. But at the same time, popular film, popular movies were kind of taking a nosedive in a lot of ways. And there were some good ones that came out, but it wasn't quite as good a quality. Whereas about 2008 on, so about the last 2010s, have been really, really pretty good, excellent quality movies and television as well, especially as we've gotten into streaming. So pretty excited about that. So I'm just going to do like my top and notables because I did say it was the year of the comic book. I feel pretty strongly about this. Again, I'm going to talk about it in the post that I write for Lost Title Cards, and that may not come up right away, so don't get too excited, but it's coming. I'm going to go ahead and do my top 5 comic book, either movies or television. The top for me had to be Endgame because it was the culmination of over a decade with, like, what was it, like 20 some movies, 21 movies. It was a lot. And this is something that had been brought in as a cohesive unit. All of these movies were made with the intent of looking at the other movies that were being made within this universe. Whereas a lot of other comic book movies have kind of been these one shots or maybe like a trilogy. And so they haven't had that much cohesion. Even if you do a sequel of a movie, didn't always have the same tone. But these, tonally, things like that, they had their own individual aspects to them because different comic book heroes had that. But overall you felt the tone of we're leading up to something, and after Infinity War, the year before was so good, and then they come in with Endgame, and it's like, wow, you managed to pull off putting all of these characters, all of these big actors, all of these superheroes into this humongous film, and it worked. They did it. They pulled it off. I only have like one or two complaints about it, and other than that, I'm really, really happy with the way that it turned out, and they should be really proud of what they did, despite what Martin Scorsese thinks. Mad respect to Scorsese, but I didn't agree with what he was saying there. I was like, yeah, I see what you're saying about the whole, film has had some problems, but what they did had never been done before, and that deserves props if nothing else. And the fact that they did it with quality is what was impressive. So yeah, anyway, the other 4 for that would be Glass, because Glass was the culmination of all of the Unbreakable split, and it was not maybe quite as good as I wanted it to be, but it was very satisfying. And if they do end up going ahead and moving forward and making like a 4th movie or moving into another trilogy or something, I'm on board. So yeah. Watchmen. Oh my goodness gracious. For a TV series that was based off of the comic book that was made into a movie, I felt very well, by Zack Snyder. Very, very good movie. So well done. Alan Moore's work, so like just one of it's like the Bible of graphic novels or something like that. Like it's that good, you know. To make a series that is like, okay, let's go, you know, like a decade or two into the future to see what has happened since then. And it was just so well done. I mean, the story was just, I felt that they did Alan Moore's story proud. Now, how he feels about it, how anybody else feels about it, okay, you know, but I was impressed with what they were able to bring in from the original story, the comic books, and bring in these characters who I felt, these actors that looked like they would have been the older versions of these heroes from the movie. And so it just, all of it was really well done. One episode in particular was so, so good. And I just highly recommend it. It's really, really, really worth it. Umbrella Academy. What a freaking treat that is. I really love Umbrella Academy. It was different. It was interesting. Great music, great concept. Different from the comics from what I understand. I haven't read the original Umbrella Academy, but what they did with the series was great, and I'm very much looking forward to the second season, which they have been teasing. They're starting to drop these little teasers of when it might be coming out. They need to just tell me, because oh, Netflix. I'm a little mad at Netflix these days, but we'll get to that somewhere else. The Boys. So talking about, one of the things I loved about this year was the concept of dystopian aspects of the whole superhero thing. Again, Brightburn, which again I didn't see, but I'm really interested in seeing. Watchmen, kind of Umbrella Academy. There's definitely a dystopian thing happening there, but The Boys, but it's that dark side of comic book superheroes, right? Like these are the heroes, and of course the original Watchmen, the graphic novel, there's the phrase "Who watches the Watchmen," right? So I really, really enjoyed where The Boys took that. Very dark, very, very violent. So be prepared for that if you do watch it. But it's fantastic. So good. Can't wait for the second season. And so that's my top 5, but I had to make a notable because for me, this didn't fit anywhere else within it. And that's Joker. Joker, wow. Joaquin Phoenix, who I've been enjoying since I started seeing him mostly in Shyamalan movies. I love him in The Village. He's really good in Signs too, even though that's not one of my favorite of Shyamalan's movies. But Joaquin Phoenix turns in this fantastic performance of the Joker, which I felt could definitely inform any of the other Jokers that have been portrayed on film before him, like Heath Ledger, Jack Nicholson, even Jared Leto. Like some people hate his, you know, the gangsta Joker or whatever, but he was interesting, you know. And the thing about the Joker is it's such a great character that every person can put their own stamp on it, and there's just something so accessible about it. From an acting standpoint, like I would not mind being at some point, I would love to see a female Joker, which would be interesting. And yeah, I'd be down to play that. I'd jump into that, definitely. But Joker, it was so good. So really, there were a couple of problems I had with it, but I'm not going to get into those here. But I just had to mention it because his performance makes that movie, and the movie's already really well put together as it is. So very, very impressed with that. So that was my top 5 comic book of the year. Now, top 5 movies. For top 5 movies, I actually couldn't stick to 5. I have had like 5 and a notable was my idea, and I couldn't stick with it because there were so many good movies this last year. I finally got to see Parasite in the beginning here of 2020, which is one of the reasons why this whole post is coming out so late. But Parasite, fantastic. So amazing. I completely understand why it won an Oscar, even though I have conflicted feelings about the Oscars. They have problems, definitely. 1917, wonderful movie. The cinematography, the story, the acting, all of it, so good. Jojo Rabbit, Taika Waititi, his turn as Hitler It's such a funny movie, and yet at the same time, it's very moving. And Taika Waititi is really good at this, like, sort of weird, zany humor one moment, and then these totally, like, moving, even tragic, like, just, like, deeply touching you right here, you know, and getting you, surrounded by all this, like, wackadoo humor. Like, he's so good at that. So yeah, I definitely had to put him in there. Knives Out was great. Chris Evans, after being Captain America for so long, got to be, you know, a naughty boy. And he was very fun to watch. But the entire cast, the whole story, the way it's written is really, really good. So I definitely recommend Knives Out. It's very funny, good mystery. So lots of good stuff there. John Wick 3, Parabellum. So this is the third installment, and apparently there's going to be at least a fourth, maybe even a fifth installment. But I'm excited for it because we're going to really see, I think, in the fourth one, a reuniting of Morpheus and Neo, because Lawrence Fishburne and my boy, whose name I suddenly can't remember. Anyway, yeah, it was really good. Particularly the dog scene, the scene with the two dogs. I really loved that, but the whole movie was really good, and I would definitely say it's my second favorite over the first, because the first was just something so different and so interesting. And it's surprisingly not a comic book. Like, I was like, oh, I should put this in the comic books. I'm like, wait, I don't think this is a comic book movie. And sure enough, it's not based off a book. It's not based off of a comic book. So when they say that, like, you know, original filmmaking is dead, they're wrong. They're wrong. Now, you may not be a big fan of this kind of movie, but what they did with this is definitely different. And that's what I love about the John Wick series. So definitely on board for the fourth installment. Once Upon a Time, Tarantino, kind of almost returning to form. This feels a lot more like some of his earlier movies, a little more Pulp Fiction, Reservoir Dogs, even Jackie Brown to a certain degree, less so like Kill Bill and stuff like that. So it was really, really, really decent movie. I very much enjoyed that one. So that's the top 5, well, technically 6 movies, but I have to give a notable mention to Godzilla, King of Monsters. If you're not a fan of Godzilla, right, I get it. It's a big, you know, dude in a monster suit, and he's stomping on like little tiny miniatures and things like that. Some people don't really get it. They don't understand the mythos behind it. They don't understand why Godzilla is so important to Japanese culture, to American culture as well, and what happened in the wake of World War II when we dropped the bomb on Hiroshima. So some people don't get that. But I love Godzilla. I grew up on Godzilla. My brother is an expert in it. He's fantastically, like, informed. He knows all the Godzilla stuff. And my big complaint with Godzilla is that whenever we've tried to bring over to an American style of filmmaking, that it hasn't really gone well. There was that one that was really not Godzilla back in like 99 or something. And it had like Matthew Broderick in it. It was a fun movie. It was enjoyable. I did not feel that it was Godzilla. And then the first movie for this Monarch series, where you've got like King Kong and all of that happening in this last decade here, the first one had too much stupid people tricks, like dumb people tricks, like really annoying, and like you just wanted them all to die. It's like, get off the screen so I can see Godzilla, and there wasn't enough Godzilla in it. So I was really annoyed by that. And so Godzilla King of Monsters far exceeded expectations. I was like, just give me more Godzilla and I'll be happy. And then they brought Mothra in. It's got, you know, Rodan. It's got all these great characters. And the design for them was beautiful. The story was good. The stupid people tricks, you know, stupid human tricks that would happen were at least like properly dealt with, like people owning their crap and like doing what they could to amend for the stupid stuff that they'd done. Very, very enjoyable. Great effects, beautiful music, nods to the original Toho Godzillas, all of this stuff, so good. Very surprising how good this turned out to be, because I was already on board just watching the trailers, and then we saw the movie and I was like actually crying a couple of times, because it was like they got it, like they understood finally and put that on the screen. And so I was very happy. My brother was too. Okay, TV series. So television, wow, this, you know, I kind of felt like in a way this was almost like the year of streaming as well. In terms of that, there were just so many things, but there was a lot of like really great season 2s this year. Westworld had, oh, just blew me away. It was so good. I'm going to get back to them in a second. Lost in Space, the second season of Lost in Space, like far and above the first season, even though first season's really good. The second season was so good. And then the OA, which if you were conflicted by the very ending of the first season of the OA, I highly recommend like going back and rewatching up to that moment and then skip right into season 2. Like, you know what happens, so just go right to season 2, because season 2 is so strange and the OA is weird to begin with. So I was just impressed at like what they were able to do with it. So yeah, I highly recommend go back, check that out. So good. So for TV series, I'm going to go ahead and do my top 5 sequel finales, because just going, oh, this particular season or what have you, was not going to work for me. So sequels, and then I'm going to do a top 5 for new series that came out. So Westworld season 2, was my top for sequels or finales for this year. It's got this amazing, like the tone, they managed to do this strange time warping situations that kept you not knowing what was going on again. So well done. Fantastic. Highly recommend it. If you haven't seen Westworld, you need to check it out. And like when you have the ability to sit down and do nothing else, like just put the phone away. It's not important right now. Watch it. It's so good. Binge it. So good. Game of Thrones. Lots of conflict there for a lot of people. A lot of people so angry. Wanted their money back, which I was like, really, guys? Come on. But I gotta say, this is kind of like the comic book, the Marvel universe, is they pulled off something that no one thought was going to take off. I mean, before Game of Thrones happened, there was no like serious like interest in fantasy. And I'm talking fantasy, not sci-fi, but fantasy, historical fantasy types of properties that weren't like badly done CGI, sparkly, kinds of shows, things like that, while I love those shows, this just had such a high quality to it, and it pulled people in. The mainstream suddenly was actually paying attention to fantasy, and it's like, ooh, and this took most of a decade, and they managed to keep all of these actors on and bring this whole story in and work with George R.R. Martin and try and figure out what was going on. Did they fail a little bit in some areas? Of course they did. They fell down numerous times. And that was not just in the last season or two. That's been throughout the series. And for the people who thought that certain things couldn't happen, they have not been paying attention. Now, were they a little rushed? Yes. At the last 2 seasons, were a little more rushed. I would have liked to have seen them spread that out a bit and really kind of get into those scenes a little bit more. And I think that would have made people a lot happier. But you cannot deny what they did. And what they did was amazing. So big props to them. Lost in Space season 2. So good. Oh my God. Dr. Smith. Like, you've got to check out Smith. She's so like my favorite part of season 2. But also the kind of awakening of the robots is another thing that's definitely worth checking out. So if you're at all interested in that sense of IA and how it awakens and what people do around that, yeah, season 2, very good. Stranger Things season 3, after a bit of a dip in season 2 where it was like, oh, it's good, it's a little, but it ends well, good, season 3 comes back and it's very much season 1. Like, it's not the same thing as season 1, but the quality's great. I really enjoyed season 3. So good. And then again, OA season 2, I already talked about that, so I won't go back into it again, but it was absolutely fantastic. I very much enjoyed the weirdness of it. Top 5 new ones. My top favorite was Dark Crystal, Age of Resistance, because I grew up on that movie. That movie is awesome. If you've never seen it, you should see the movie. You should see the Netflix series because it's so good. I was so happy that they went with the puppets and didn't try to go too CGI. Where the CGI is, I felt was very appropriate, necessary for what they were doing. So I'm very happy with it, and I'm impressed that they're managing to stretch it into a couple of seasons. I think they've already announced that they are going to do a season 2. I think they have. I need to check on that, but yeah, it's going to go somewhere. And I was surprised with where it went. So yeah, they did awesome. Good Omens. Good Omens is Terry Pratchett, Neil Gaiman, book adaptation, basically a miniseries. We're not certain. As far as I know, it's supposed to be like this is the end of that with that miniseries, but it kind of left it open like they might be able to do something more if they wanted to. So we'll see what happens with that. I mean, Terry Pratchett died, but Neil Gaiman's still there, and like if the filmmakers do what they're supposed to do, they could still pull that off pretty well. Russian Doll. This was a Netflix series that really surprised me. Basically, that sense of kind of doing life over and over again. I can't think of the movie that I'm thinking of that does that, but it's basically her starting her life over from a certain point. She just keeps going back. Oh, Groundhog Day. It's basically Groundhog Day, but like it's her birthday, and all this crazy stuff keeps happening. It has a very satisfying ending. It's a really good series. I enjoyed it a lot. Shades of even Sunshine of the Spotless Mind to it as well. So it was good. For anime, Love, Death, and Robots. Wow, what a great series. And it brought me back to the Animatrix, this, this grouping, this whole anthology of really good anime, animated shorts. So yeah, I definitely recommend that one. You can watch it in little spurts and check out different ones. They don't have any particular order, but yeah, they're really good. His Dark Materials and Carnival Row. Again, this was another one. I wasn't able to keep it down to 5. So I'm going to put His Dark Materials and Carnival Row together because I liked them a lot. They were up there in the favorites, but they didn't quite hit at the same level. But they're both really, really good in their own right. And I'm looking forward to season 2 for both of them. And one of those is on HBO and one of them is on Amazon Prime. So... and my notable mention for this year for best episode of the year is, and it's possibly the best episode of any show I've ever seen, is Westworld Season 2, Episode 8. The title is Kixia, which is Lakota for Remember. And I'm not going to give away anything about this, just it's one more reason to watch Westworld if you haven't. But the beauty of this, the story, because what it does is it informs a great deal of what's been going on in the story thus far, but at the same time, it's something I feel you can actually view. It stands alone. You could actually watch it on your own. If someone just gives you like a general idea of what's going on in Westworld, you could probably come into this story and get the emotional resonance from it, even not knowing the general characters that well. So yeah, I highly recommend that. And it's that's it for TVs and movies for 2019.